Hello, welcome to Into the Foxhole, episode 12. Here with your boy Ed.
Your boy Craig.
Oh, yeah, back at it again. You know, another Friday out here chilling. Still telling them that. We out here chilling. It's Friday. Yeah, we like to, out of the recent news that recently came up, we like to talk about backwards compatibility. How important is it to the consumer to have this to any product released?
Let me tell you about the importance of backwards compatibility.
And does any of this really matter into making any purchase of anything? Well, before I go on, tell you any more news, you want to say what your thoughts are before hearing anything else further?
Hell yeah, backwards compatibility is incredibly important.
That's my dog.
I mean, maybe I'm just being selfish, but right now, I mean, let's be honest. Everyone has their old consoles.
You're right.
Consoles get old. Consoles break.
You're right.
Some consoles malfunction. I know there are people out there that got their function in NESs, their function in SNESs.
Fuck those
all
boys.
That good stuff. But I don't.
That man can play Contra native.
Like right now, the only thing I have that works is I have a PS3 that doesn't even belong to me, a PlayStation 4. My Wii doesn't even work. My disc drive doesn't work. And I have my Wii U. So literally, besides current gen systems, I guess we can call it current gen now, right? PS4.
You may. I believe when
right?
you pass that threshold,
they're allowed to be current gen.
You pass a specific threshold, and I'm like, you're allowed to, sir.
So yeah,
people are like,
we're playing current gen systems. The only real system I have right now.
We're playing next gen systems. Whoa, boy, you came from the future. The fuck? This is basically how it is now. Somebody brings up and says the word next gen, they're like, wow, stand back. This guy has PlayStation 5.
It's true.
You are allowed, Craig.
It's been out long enough. So, I mean,
it is the current.
Besides the current gen systems, the only real console I have that works right now is a PS3, and it's not a PS3, it's a slim PS3, so it's not a PS3 that is backwards compatible like the old PS3.
Well, you mean not PC with PlayStation 2, because you could still play PlayStation 1 games on there.
That's true. That is true. I can play PlayStation 1 games. You are absolutely right. But regardless, I have an entire a very expansive, a very collection I am proud of PS2 games that I can no longer play. They are literal dust collectors because I can't touch them anymore. And I mean, sure, everyone's like, oh yeah, you can go ahead, you can go on your Amazons, you can buy a PS2, whatever. But I don't know if these things are going to work or how long they're going to work for. I mean, these consoles, they've been around for a long time. They've been put to use. They've been put through the grind. So I don't know what I'm getting. I want a system that is current and that I can actually play the games that I spent so much money on.
That's my dog. That man built that life.
We all have, if you're a gamer like me and Ed here.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm sure if you listen to this, you have to be, because we really only talk about issues that, matter to, true gamers, I think, personally. But, so I trust that you're a gamer like us listening to this podcast. So you have these games that are just sitting there. Now, you may have the system that still works for it, but I know some of you don't. And I know that's pissing off some of you.
Oh, yeah.
Because we all have our games that we want to play that we just can't.
No, you're right. Before I go and say the news that I would say was, focused central around this actual podcast, I would say that, some people, you're going to have the games and you won't have the system. But, but in this respect, sometimes that may not be enough. Like, you have the games and you don't have the platform, so you wish to have the compatibility to allow you to do such things. But sometimes, let's say if you're in a situation where for some reason or the other, an architectural reason essentially stops that from being a feasible thing on the newer platform, would playing this older library be more important than, progressing the future of the platform?
Right.
Now, with the native PC that was on PlayStation 3, or the 60 gig models, I believe the 80 gigs had them through emulation, but with the 60 gigs, you had it through native. It was something that was very taxing on the system to be able to try to run that actual older, architect type. Now, would running them be that important, even if you felt it might have hindered like the even performance of the actual game?
That's an interesting question. That is a very interesting question. I mean, it's hard to say because everyone wants their consoles to run as best that they possibly can, especially
because I know some of those emulations ran that shit. Some of that emulations ran that shit bad.
Oh no, they did. They did. I know for sure because I had a 60 gig. I had a 60 gig for a very long time. God rest his soul. Died last year.
It's R.I.P.
2007 to 2014. God rest his soul.
Shiny fat.
Oh man, it was beautiful.
We called her shiny fat. You had a shiny fat.
She was gorgeous, man.
and not a slim dull. Or slim matted, as we called it.
She was gorgeous, man.
Slim rough.
With her little non-buttons. Just touched.
Smooth.
That 60 gig was gorgeous. But you bring up an interesting point. But at the same time, it's what do I do then? How does this this whole collection now? Because I've devoted myself to Sony for quite some time. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. I've bought in Xboxes before. I've had an Xbox that got stolen. I have a 360 currently that gets no playtime because the only reason I bought it was for the original Mass Effect. And
correct.
So I've devoted myself to Sony for quite some time, so I have quite an extensive collection of PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 games that are just nothing to me.
You have some of the means, but not halfway there. You have half of that equation apparently. I agree with the need of wanting to have that library extended. I would just make the point that anybody would probably make in a situation like this. If the value of it is so great, then the choice of buying a PlayStation 2 makes more sense than almost anything to basically alleviate this. So if you would need it that badly, then the system being bought would make more sense than ever waiting for it if this library was as great as it needs to be. I get nobody just, has money to be like, let's all buy 100 systems or some shit. But at the same time, the price of a used PlayStation 2 right now is, I believe it's not even the cost of a brand new game. I mean, so it makes sense that if someone wants it that badly, that merely just purchase the system. I say this just as a, sort of obvious answer to the solution to anyone's problem that would need it, that if it holds such a huge value, the system should always have been rebought if it died, or especially kept prior to being sold. I know a big deal many people stated was that, well, they sold their PlayStation 3 before they bought a PlayStation 4, or they sold their 360 before they bought an Xbox One, and I question...
To me, you shame on you. Shame on you. The only reason I've ever gotten rid of a system, granted, I haven't even gotten rid of them. They're just sitting in my closet now, broken.
Oh well, no, that's a different story.
They don't work, but they're there. Damn it! I didn't sell any of them.
I just use that as an example to say that some people did, and you have to question if it was a value to you. It should have never been sold in the first place. Before we carry on to talk more about backwards compatibility and its importance to the industry, would like to say some news. So prior to this, what we're talking about, this actual cast, I did a newscast regarding a rumor with the Battlefront bundle that was later confirmed, was that it had PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 games, and PS1 and the PS2 games that were on here were questioned if these were titles that were remade or remastered to work on PlayStation 4, or what were they? Because we couldn't find any ESRB for these titles, and they thought it was
the PS4 bundle. I'm sorry.
Yes, it was the PlayStation 4 Star Wars bundle. So we couldn't find who actually made those versions. It's kind of strange for anyone to say, okay, we can't really find any location of where this version came. And today it was essentially, or the day before, yesterday, it was revealed that, well, it was revealed through Digital Foundry that the actual game itself from after the bundle's release is essentially running on emulation. Like, you remember how, like, if certain games I know were emulated on PlayStation 3, if you played a certain game, the screen would black out, and it would tell you to turn your little controller back on, and then it had a virtual memory card. It's basically, if you put in a PlayStation 2 a game inside of a PlayStation 3, it goes through these settings because it is not a PlayStation 3 game, it is a PlayStation 2 game. Now, if you play any titles that were ported from PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3, it's not actually going to do that because it is a actual PleStation. In some technical understandings, it is a PlayStation 3 game.
Before you go on, I just want to go ahead and state the games that are actually coming out.
That's already came out in the bundle.
They're going to come out with the bundle, or that have come out with the bundle. Mm-hmm. That is Super Star Wars.
Sounds nice.
So that is a game. That dates to the Super Nintendo. We have Star Wars Racer, which is the pod racing game.
Yeah.
You have Star Wars Bounty Hunter and Star Wars Jedi Starfighter.
Bounty Hunter's probably the only good.
So like all those games are like.
Bounty Hunter's the only good game of that whole damn thing. No,
Racer was fine.
I actually
and
didn't
Super Star Wars was broke.
I don't know if I like that Racer game. That racing game felt like it gave me AIDS.
But a lot of things give you AIDS.
Craig's like keeping them honest here. But these games that were announced, Digital Foundry goes on to show that, it's running on emulation. Because just like I was telling you before, if you remember when you put in a PlayStation 2 game in the fat PlayStation 3, it would show that little screen. It would go blank, and then you had your virtual memory card. That's not the way, like right now, if you were to play The Last of Us on PlayStation 4, it's not showing you a virtual, PlayStation 3 memory card. It's not basically making you believe you're playing a PlayStation 3. Right. It's essentially a game that was ported or transferred over to another platform.
Right.
Now, to be transferred to another platform is not the same thing as emulation. Emulation is the compatibility, emulating, it's pretending to be the software. Yes. And I don't know if EA...
It is reverting to a software.
It is reverting.
It is reverting to a software that...
It's like,
yes, as you were.
It's so in that respect, it's difficult to think that EA would go through all this length to essentially add compatibility of another piece of hardware as opposed to porting it, because that sounds like that costs more money.
Especially now
than just porting the title.
You really want to go ahead and make sure that a PlayStation 4 can emulate a Super Nintendo game?
Who the fuck?
Like,
so I don't even that one's the only one that I actually think is actually like a port of it, as I don't really believe they would do something strange like that. But it was when I brought this up as a rumor on our newscast, I brought up that I believed that it would be that because there was an ESRB rating for several other titles. It was for Twisted Metal Black, and it was for a couple of other PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 1 titles that made me believe, well, if this is going on, then and there's going to be trophy support for these games that don't necessarily exist on these platforms, doesn't this sort of confirm that these things will be playable on this platform, but not necessarily transferred over in terms of being ported?
Right, especially if it's... Well, if there's trophy support, doesn't that like support the emulation? Not the emulation.
The port one, yeah. In some weird way, yes. But because the actual title that they're showing on Digital Foundry, they were showing that there were trophies coming up, even though it came through like emulation. It's not impossible for, from what we've seen from Digital Foundry, for them to do that, because that's the way he's playing the Pod Racers game. Show the video down below, you guys see. But it's like because of that, it's more believable that it is emulation that they're doing, just based on why would you port it, add trophies, but do emulation? Because none of that makes sense for a company to go out of their way to emulate another platform for another company. Like, I don't know, it would cost them more money technically speaking, to create an emulator, then it would probably cost them to really port those titles. So I don't think this is EA's doing. I really think it's like, or LucasArts doing, since they're the ones who did those titles.
Yeah.
I think this is more so Sony's doing. So I believe that at PSX, they're going to reveal emulation for PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2. And I think that's probably going to be one of their highlight announcements. Because this reveal is starting to show that this is more likely what the situation is than not. And even though many people believe that maybe it's just being ported, I just don't think so. The fashion in which I saw this game in the footage, and it's up online for anybody who purchased that bundle and are currently playing those games. It sounds more that that's what they're doing. Now, the point of this podcast is really talking about backwards compatibility. Is it something that's necessarily needed in the gaming industry? I say generally, yes. Yes, because every medium sort of has their own way of doing stuff like that until we get, in my opinion, a defined medium that's BC with everything prior to.
Right.
Now, let's say with what Blu-ray is now. Now, Blu-ray is BC to DVD. So all the films that were in VHS essentially had to get transferred over to DVD in order to be compatible. So if your ass really like Titanic, they weren't going to be like, bam, let's just put a VCR in every single DVD player. At some point, these...
I actually had the two VHS.
Yeah, I knew. I actually knew it. I knew that because I remember always seeing that here. But what's wrong with you, Greg? No, but they had to get transferred over. This gets to the point where when you talk about backwards compatibility, and you brought up that the platform broke, it didn't work. We also have to lean to the idea that, well, maybe somebody owns a platform and they don't own the game. Consider that, let's say, something like Parasite Eve. And I use this as an example of a company either emulating or bringing back or putting through digital or what have you. Let's say you don't own Parasite Eve. Mm-hmm. I played Parasite Eve and I don't own the copy of the game that I want to, replay again. So for me to say, okay, my PlayStation 3 plays PlayStation 1 games, okay, so my solution is to go on Amazon and buy it. It costs over $80 to get a brand new copy of that game. Absolutely. I'm not going to buy it used because you have to consider the time period that this game came out in. You have to consider that it's probably not going to be in the best condition of the people who have it. Who wants to fucking play RPG, having that shit get skips, nigga? Ain't gonna have to have it.
Let's be honest. I mean, you're buying a game that was made in like the early 2000s. You're buying it used. Mm-hmm. At worst, and you have to consider, if it's a used game, you have to consider it in its worst possible form.
That's how I feel.
And you have to consider that if this game was bought in the early 2000s, that means it had to have stood through, what's that now, like 15 years of play,
vigorous rape,
just manual handing around and just wear and tear. Like that game's that game's gonna have seen some shit.
Oh yeah, some sort of digital rape.
And even then, especially like with like PlayStation 1 games.
PlayStation my god,
1 games, man.
Damn, those CDs are fragile.
You touch that thing, and like
broken.
I have seen Final Fantasy like to this day, like
Final Fantasy
our good friend Admin Jason.
Exactly, that's why I brought it up, Craig. That's why I brought it up, Craig.
They have not finished Final Fantasy 9 because when they bought it, when that game was still like fresh, they couldn't finish the third disc because of it is constantly freezing.
Hey, so in that respect, it's not necessarily just not owning the system; it's also not owning the game. So I think before anybody asks for BC to be a normal thing, I personally think we need to even have a stage in gaming to where we even have the medium advanced enough so that's not even an issue. Meaning that, my personal opinion, at this day and age, now is the time to want to have some sort of system that has backwards compatibility or some sort of superior emulation that allows emulation for all the past titles that you have, but in a form that essentially lets you play them in a way that makes sense. Those titles were old, and if you did not own them, adding BC doesn't really help you because you still don't have the actual game.
Right.
Now, it being digital on the PlayStation Store is what helps people because it allows you to be able to buy it in a form that works at a discount price. Right now, that game is like fucking $10. So, which actually I personally feel is too expensive too. But it's
sometimes.
Sometimes, but it's $10 because Square likes to like jack up their fucking price on PSN all their games.
But Square knows what they got. That's the problem.
They fuck those guys. No,
I agree. But I still have not bought a lot of games from Square on their fucking thing because I think it's way too expensive. But like Square knows that like what they have is gaming history.
Fuck
so
boys.
they have the leeway to jack up these prices to do what the fuck
That's
they
how
want
they
with
get
them.
you. That's
But
how they
what
get
I've always
you.
said, what I've always said is that like I mean I don't know how like maybe I'm just speaking from like a selfish point of view as being myself, but I've always felt like there is a market to release a system that can just play like there's specifically designed. It's a hard word. Specifically designed to just play these older titles.
Well, they have that system. I think it's called like the Retro 5 or something, or Retro something, and it plays all the older. So you know, Craig, this is what it is, bro.
Yeah, I mean,
it does, Craig.
Let's be real.
This is what it is, Craig. Damn.
Let's be
real. Either take
real.
the shit or leave the shit, Craig. Damn. Retro 5. I think it's called the Retro 5. It's called the Retro number. All right.
No, I know
That's what it is.
But like, I've never heard anything good about it.
Greg's like, there has a market for a
like,
good
one. Everyone's always been like, oh man, you have the option of buying this Retro 5 or Retro X, we'll call it. Or you can buy just an original used PS2.
I got you.
Everyone always goes to original
I got
PS2.
you. I don't know if the Retro one supports that. I think the Retro one was just like NES, Super NES, and then Genesis, and like several other like really like retro platforms. But I do feel that there is a market that wants something like that.
I think so too.
So I feel
how big? I'm not sure.
I'm
not sure if it's big enough to warrant like the R&D.
Yes, I agree. But that's what brings me to my next point. Though I'm saying I generally feel that BC in the long scheme of things, I feel backwards compatibility for where we're at in gaming is necessary. Simply because, I would say necessary for gaming as a whole, because we need to be able to advance the medium like other mediums have. You don't have several different players to play music only because there is only one input for it in terms of your damn ears. So you don't have anything where for visual stuff, because a lot of the medium that now gets deeper and deeper into adding more detail still done disc-based, and there's still BC with the previous disc stuff. So you could own a DVD of a film, and I know Sony and Panasonic are working on, I think it's called Archive, one of those things. But Archive is their new media format, and it's going to be like 300 gigs like per layer. It's got like several layers or some shit. But you're able to do BC of Blu-ray DVD with Archive. So it's another format that could go on for 10, 15 years that will allow 4K and other crazy resolutions that they'll come out in the future to be able to have that much detail, but still go BC for gonna be 20 plus years, which is insane. So we don't have that in gaming simply because the closest thing we have to something like that is PC in terms of being backwards or in terms of being an OS architectural type that still exists. But even with PC, you still have like certain games that are not compatible with certain OSs. You still have it where like some old MS-DOS games clearly not going to work in certain Windows. Some Windows 95 games still don't work in.
I remember like a couple months ago, I tried like booting up a version of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego.
Fucked up. You fucked up, Craig.
I was mad.
Wasn't supported, Greg. Wasn't supported, Greg.
If you're anywhere computer knowledgeable, way more so than I am, you realize that shit ain't gonna work on Windows 7. But I wanted it. I tried it. It didn't work out.
And the point I was gonna make with bringing that up is when you have something where it's not of native hardware and it has to be emulated, compatibility comes not down to the company that creates it. Compatibility actually comes down to the publisher that had the game in the first place. So let's say, in this example, I know everybody has gone through this. If you own Fallout 3 on PC, many people might have bought Fallout 3 on PC, and at the time where Windows 7 was a new OS, Fallout 3 is not supported by Windows 7, it's supported by Windows XP. So if you try to play that game, it's going to crash, it's not going to work correctly. If people had workarounds that even got it to work, it doesn't work right. So in my PC, in my rig currently, I have a hard drive for Windows XP 7 and even 10. So because of that, it's like I understand certain games will work. I understand certain games won't work. I know that there is this threshold, even on PC, that it's not full 100% BC. Certain games were just not supported by the OS, and the older publishers just said, fuck it, we're not going to because there's not even a demand for it. Now, the reason why I say this in regards to it may not being able to work is because if we want in the future to have emulation through an entire generation down below, let's say this PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 1 thing goes far. Let's say they do this emulation and they say, you know what, for the rest of the PlayStations, we'll always emulate these two platforms. They haven't confirmed 3, which I don't think they're going to do. I think for the next platform, they'll probably do 3, because 3's, like, Cell's architecture is just, like, too fucked up. Like,
yeah.
But it's
let's be honest.
Because they haven't even been able to make a PC version of emulation for PlayStation 3. I haven't been able to. It's like that, like, fucked up. But if they were able to do that and have that whole library, it's like that whole library would have to just be converted to something that could be supported to that understanding. So in that respect, Sony would have to do that as the publisher, because the emulation support actually leans on the publisher to even agree to get their game done that way. This is where it turns into a porting issue. It's no longer oh, well, I own the game, so I'm just putting it in a system. It also comes into support. Does the game work right through the program?
Yeah.
So that goes down to the publisher doing it. The only thing that makes sense is complete 100% native, like what's in the Wii U. So the Wii U is able to play all your Wii games. In the same respect, the Wii was able to play all your GameCube games, but do so natively.
Right.
The issue with this is you now deem the entire architecture to making it play an older game. Mm-hmm. So it's no longer, it's pretending to be it. It has to be it in general for it to work that way. So that means that...
How do you progress your hardware?
Yes. I mean, that means that we would have to, let's say we want PlayStation 5 to be fully BC with PlayStation 4. The architecture would have to essentially be x86, just like what's on this one, if not something that's realistically compatible in some regard. Yeah. Let's say it would have to just remain the same CPU type, but it could go higher in bit rate or whatever. But it would still have to be somewhat compatible. The issue with this is now you deem the entire computing process of the next hardware to be this to allow an entire library. Gaming, I think, in a great perfect world, should have BC, because it should be like the rest of the industries that essentially have all their stuff together.
Right.
But because the input of what games are, it's extremely difficult. You're talking about different ones that have vibration. You're talking about different games that use different... You don't remember like PlayStation 2 how it had pressure sensitive buttons?
Yeah.
Well, PlayStation 3 doesn't. So you have to question, okay, so if PlayStation 2 had pressure sensitive buttons, and then the next platform, or excuse me, I think PlayStation 4 doesn't, gets where one of the systems get rid of pressure sensitive buttons, and I think it might have been PlayStation 3 or PlayStation 4 in terms of going fully digital versus analog.
Even then, like, even if like PlayStation 3 doesn't have pressure sensitive, but you still have to consider that PlayStation 3 had 6-axis.
Yeah, exactly. So even that like makes, because I'm not even understood. I think they have the move like controls on the PlayStation 4, but I'm not understood if that is like, could it mimic 6-axis? Because I'm not sure. It's exactly. I don't know if it's a whole gyroscope thing. I actually don't know that. But and that's a great thing you brought that up, because we're trying to say there are certain functions that were specifically made for past systems that may not be able to be translated because of what gaming is. You in a movie, you view the movie. In something you listen to, you just listen to you. Yes, it's not like a game where you are playing with inputs and there are different things and features that you're doing with these games. Now, if you have something where you're able to mimic those things, and it means that you're going to have to fuck up the next generation of consoles to simply support this next one. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's that important to do so. I think it should in the perfect world. The business side of me says, hell no. The business side of me says, don't fucking do it at all. Yeah. For a reason being is because I don't know how many people are really buying systems to actually play the last systems. It's hard to say, like, if you were to get a 4K player, you're likely getting a 4K player because there's some movie coming out that you want to play when this 4K player, or with a 4K TV.
I understand that.
So in terms of BC, in terms of emulation, in terms of anybody wanting these specific features, you have to say, at what cost are these features really, really wanted? And does the industry need it so badly that it fucks up the next system that comes out because of how these things are actually put into the system.
It just really sucks because, like we said, like within genres like film and genres like music, you always have the means of transporting everything from one format to another, whereas gaming is a little bit different. But before we end this, I want to actually get into it. I'm glad it was cool. Last E3, Xbox announced their whole backwards compatibility campaign. Kudos on you. I don't want to stress too much on it, but I want to ask you what your feelings on PlayStation Now and what that whole deal is. How you feel about that? If you feel is the way to handle these sorts of things.
Yeah, in terms of how it relates to backwards compatibility. Yeah. I've always felt that PC and PlayStation Now are not necessarily the same things. Mm-hmm. Now, PlayStation Now, how I've always seen it, is essentially it's like a rental service, it's like a streaming service, and you pay money for it.
It almost seems like the GameFly for older games.
Yes,
that you can now play on your
in terms,
system.
to
me, I still kind of see it in the realms of backwards compatibility because you are still playing older system games mm-hmm. on your newer console. Mm-hmm. Now, but you're just doing it through a streaming service instead.
I would say
is this the way that we should do this?
I would say no. In the greatest technical sense, PS Now is not backwards compatibility in terms of what it is currently, simply because backwards compatibility essentially means it is compatible with the software you currently own, meaning that I get PlayStation 2 game or PlayStation 3 game I own, and I put it inside of the system, and PlayStation Now allows my PlayStation 4 to play those games. Yeah. But that's not really what PlayStation Now actually is. Now, though many have...
It's a cloud-based thing.
Yeah, it's like a cloud-based game. When they bought, I think it was called Gakkai, it was like this company that was like in China or some other place, and they purchased them because they were sort of like OnLive's rivals, I would say. But the whole thing with that is that it's not necessarily anything regarding compatibility. If you factor in that you cannot put a game inside of it and make the program run the game. Though many people confuse that because PlayStation Now could work on PlayStation 4. Well, PlayStation Now could also work on PSP. PlayStation Now could also work on PlayStation 3. PlayStation Now could also work on TVs. It's not a solution to BC, and it's not has anything to do with backwards compatibility. It has no more to do with backwards compatibility any more than, let's say, if you bought The Last of Us Remastered, any more than you played the PlayStation 4 version of that game. That wouldn't be considered backwards compatible because that is essentially a game transferred over to PlayStation 4. Absolutely. It is not, I put The Last of Us in my system and it works. Mm-hmm. So in the realm of remasters and remakes and porting, in the realm of any of that, none of those things I would view ever as backwards compatibility, simply because it is not essentially you being able to play a copy of the game you own. Can the service actually be that? I'm not really sure. And to be quite honest, it would be harder to really do that because what it's saying is, okay, you put the disc in the system reads it and says, oh, this is the game that we're reading right now, and we're going to allow you to play it through streaming. The strange thing about this is like, even if you were to allow this to work that way, it would actually be easier to just emulate the whole thing versus let you stream the game, because that's like, it's strange to get strange to get the purpose of its existence then. I get that somebody who wants to rent a game, who wants to just play a series of like PlayStation games that they never played before, could just go on there and then rent it. But that could be done on any platform regardless of what the platform is. Mm-hmm. You could do that on PlayStation 3. Let's say if you didn't have the game and you had PlayStation Now, you could be able to play Ico, or you could play games that you never played before. You could be able to play it on your PlayStation 3, even though the game exists on the platform itself. If you were to put a game inside of it and that game was the game you owned, and let's say you put it inside the system that didn't support the game, I could sort of see them being able to say, in an extreme sense, I could see it with PlayStation 3 games, and let's say you put a PlayStation 3 game inside of it, and because they can't emulate it, it could just read what the game is. And then now if you have the PlayStation Now service, this game isn't charged or something for you to play it or something like that. But I could see in some respect that being it. But the service currently as it is right now, I cannot say is backwards compatibility any more than a remaster is backwards. I can't say a remaster is backwards compatibility as that doesn't actually mean that. I mean, in terms of business purposes, I don't think they should do it if it costs too much money. If it's something that's too costly, if it's something that is too much of a hindrance of R&D time, which should be spent doing other things, I'm not 100% sure they should go the route if it doesn't make sense to the architecture or if it doesn't make sense to design. If it doesn't make sense for those reasons, I say no, only because, like I said before, if you really own a library of something like this, it would make more sense to own the past system if needed that badly.
No, I guess really the question then it comes down to what I want to try and get at is, do you think PlayStation Now is a service, like, is it a necessary service? Would you rather just have a system be backwards compatible, or would you like it to have a system like PlayStation Now be set in place so that we can just go ahead and stream these games?
They could crack asking the questions that need to be answered. I look at it like it doesn't really boil down to that as much as it boils down to do you rent games. A lot of the service boils down to whether you're a renter or you're a buyer. Because I'm a buyer, because it's like many times I don't finish games. If they're too long, sometimes I may not finish them, and I don't know if I would be able to, I guess, use the service's greater potential, I would say, if I wasn't completing the games at all. People who are going to be masters to complete games, they're the ones that are going to be buying rentals. In terms of BC, yeah, I would want it native instead of PlayStation Now, not necessarily because of what PlayStation Now is, just because it's more so that I don't really use rental stuff. I wouldn't pay to use rental stuff, so I wouldn't see it as a solution. And on top of, I wouldn't actually want to stream my games. If I would want to stream my games and they made sense and I was okay paying for the service in terms of rentals, okay, I guess I could sort of see the use for it. In the same respect, somebody might see a use to GameFly. I don't even know how comparable this is to a service like GameFly or something like that. Right. But it's like if I were to
used PlayStation. I've used GameFly, but I've never used PlayStation Now, so I can't make that comparison myself.
Yeah, so it's hard to make the comparison for it because because PlayStation Now and backwards compatibility are essentially not really the same thing or so far away from each other. I only choose native because I don't rent, not because I have anything against PlayStation Now. I just don't really rent. I don't get the method of it. But in terms of them adding it towards a business thing, I don't know how this changes anything. I don't know how much anybody was really specifically buying any system to play the older ones. I find it's great use to the consumer base. Like to Microsoft's credit, it's a good idea to have emulation because they stayed with an architectural type that was similar. So the architecture type of the Xbox One is actually much more similar to the 360 because the 360 by default was already that closer to PC than PlayStation 3 was. So their emulation, everyone already knew that. But you guys already knew that. But it's like they even had talks of emulating Xbox. I know Phil Spencer stated that he had talks about that. The greatest thing about what Microsoft is doing, especially with
cameos.
The greatest thing about what they're doing with BC right now is they're basically laying down the blueprint for if you have an architecture type that's similar, this is how we want it done in the future. Now, with them talking about getting, and I think they really should do the Xbox One, even though it's not going to sell units, I don't think either company are doing it to sell more units, as I think they know they will never sell the amount of units that somebody would really want this feature of to even recoup the cost. It's generally just a gesture of goodwill. The idea of saying we have Xbox on our system and you could own every generation of Xbox platforms on essentially one system is a big deal because that makes you think if this is the future of gaming, this is a great place to be at. This means that, especially what they're doing with the digital store. Did you know that when you buy an Xbox digital game on 360, or let's say you go on Xbox One store, you could buy 360 games on Xbox One store and play them on your Xbox One.
Interesting.
Yes. So this is the thing that makes it very interesting because it's no longer just I bought a used game. Absolutely. It's I bought the digital version. The publisher got their money.
I think that's the way it needs to be, because especially now, because like now that we have all this online stuff, everyone has their online profile. We've carried over from our PlayStation 3s to our PlayStation 4, from our 360s to our Xbox One.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like we have. It's essentially a Microsoft account that we have and a Sony account that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And now you are literally just building up your library. You're building up your account and just saying like, yes, I want all these games. I bought all these games through your PSN store, through your Xbox Live store.
Mm-hmm.
I have all these things saved to this one account, and it keeps on carrying over from next system. Imagine if you can just keep on carrying it over from now to all these future consoles.
Bruh.
And now, instead of like me having this bookshelf of games, which is fine. I think it looks immaculate. I think it really brings this room together. But imagine now that like when the PlayStation 5 comes out, I'll be like, man, can't wait for my PlayStation 5 or can't wait for my Xbox. Whatever the fuck they want to call it.
We just always call it X. We always just say X next.
X next. When the X next comes out, I don't have to worry about how much longer is my PlayStation 4 gonna last? How much longer is my Xbox One gonna last? And am I gonna see these games ever again? Because I have this sanctuary, if you will, that I built through these other consoles that I can say like, hey, well, when my PlayStation 5 comes out, maybe, it doesn't have those launch titles that I thought it was, because, launch titles are never as great as we want them to be. But at least I have all these digital titles that I bought on my PlayStation 4, on my PlayStation 3s, that I can just carry over and I can
it's a big deal.
Keep me over.
Big deal.
That is a big deal.
I think in terms of, and I know lots of people never factored this, the digital side of this is so extremely important that what I heard the deal between that, you could emulate 360 games wasn't a big deal to me, simply because you could emulate it, you still have to get, publishers who will even be on board. Every publisher won't be on board in emulation. It's not going to happen. And so everybody would rather hear native support, but native support is not, at this stage, it's not really feasible.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have an update and say, it'll work on there, but it's like how they're doing it, it has to be emulation. The digital thing is what got me, simply because it's trying to say, you could, buy a used game and you could play it on your Xbox One. Yes. It's saying on a Xbox store, the digital games that will be supported now will exist on Xbox One. So it's no longer being seen as, okay, here's the 360 titles and here are the Xbox One titles. It's here are the titles that play on any of the platforms.
Here are your Xbox titles.
Yes. And that's an incredible thing. The idea that you could buy an Xbox One and go in the actual store and then have an entire backlog of older titles. Let's say you didn't play one of these titles. To know that you could download the title from the screen and have it work on your platform is a big deal financially to the publishers that will even want to support it. Because it's them saying, we're getting money when you downloaded this game. You otherwise may have never bought that game digitally.
Thank you.
Because
let's be honest. As gamers, we all talk about, especially because gamers are growing up. Let's be honest. Gamers are growing up. We all have experience these days. And there are a lot of new people coming into the habit, coming into the, whatever you want to call it, the gamer culture. And there are a lot of games that they've missed out on. And there's people that have talked to, say, hey, man, I want you to play, maybe Halo, let's say Halo 12 comes out, Xbox, blah, blah, blah. Halo 12 comes out and be like, hey man, have you played Halo 1 though? Because Halo 1 was the joint. Halo 1 was the shit. And all of a sudden this guy, little Jimmy in 2000 whatever, comes out like, I never actually played Halo 1.
Jimmy, old bitch.
Play Halo 1. Imagine now if Jimmy can now go back and play Halo 1 and say, man, this is a good ass game.
And that
builds a customer that now will buy every single Halo from then on.
Yeah, and that's That's really the big deal about backwards compatibility in terms of the overarching grand scheme of things, is the idea that the number of people who are going to be going and playing these games will advertise the future of the series. But it's also saying that, okay, let's say if you have, like I was saying before with Parasite Eve, that necessarily having the system support the actual format doesn't, but the actual format doesn't necessarily, it supporting it doesn't mean that you have the game. Mm-hmm. So it having a digital version on PlayStation Now is extremely important. It can't just be, it could play the disc. Mm-hmm. It has to be in another form to say, we are not just preserving it to say, well, you could play it. That doesn't mean shit to anyone because you still have to own the game. Mm-hmm. Now, I get that some people feel that, well, the support itself is a greater big deal. The support itself being a greater big deal, I think makes more sense on a digital front because it says that we're not going to cater that the only people who own these games are the people who are lucky enough to get the physical copy. We understand that it's not going to be, we should be fucking happy that there was a reprint of any of the Persona games that you purchased. Cool. Consider that, what if those games never made it on PSN? Because I bought a PSN version of the actual game. I was going to get a PlayStation 2 one, but I didn't want to have the load times are much faster than the PSN version. Now, let's say
I'm actually considering buying the PSN version just for that.
You're a good kid.
Just to buy it and play it again.
It's a good ass game. Good ass game.
Good ass game. Persona 3.
Good ass game, bro. But it's like it's the thing about having a library of digital games that are older games that you still want to play. And you want to be able to get them at an affordable price. It's it's not really just about having it, because at the end of the day, having the support of that the format could play the games doesn't mean you have the games. Absolutely. And having a digital library of some of these older titles to essentially preserve them for other generations to play the games is a great thing. It's something that says 20 years from now, some of these publishers could be getting paid more money than they ever were. Consider this. Okay, Onimusha series. Love that fucking series to death.
I've never actually.
What the fuck?
I know. I've seen you play it.
We have to stop the podcast in 5 minutes. Amber's like, I saw you play it twice. He's like, I saw you play it twice. I know, Nobunaga. But
all I know, that's literally all I know about that game is Nobunaga.
But this game, it has no digital version. This game has only made on PlayStation 2. And that was it. They had a little collection of it. I know they had like little reprint stuff, but that's it. You cannot find anything of Onimusha on PlayStation 3 or any format therefore after, because it was never...
It's like a legacy of Kane games too.
That too. So it's like
there's so many fantastic games that haven't gotten reprints.
Yes. So because they don't get reprints, it's like, never mind if your system supports the format. You may not have the game. So if somebody says like, I know Dawn of Dreams Online is like $40 or $50 or some shit, brand new.
Yeah,
it's like $40 or $50. But if I own the entire Onimusha series, so it's like for me to play the games, I have to whip out the PlayStation 2. Mm-hmm. I recently, like a couple months ago, brought out the PlayStation 2 specifically to play Onimusha 2, Craig. So and I played Summon Killer 7.
Use a wired controller.
Yeah, it was like really weird. I forgot like how different a PS2 controller like feels compared to like 3 and 4. But it's like I had to do that to play the game because there was no solution. Now I own the system, I own the game. So you might say, fuck, does it matter that you don't got it on PlayStation? What does that matter? It has everything to do with what if I didn't? Yeah. I'm not saying that in like a mean way. I'm saying that I'm just one of the few that happens to own several PlayStation 2s. I own 4 PlayStation, our family owns 4 PlayStation 3s, and we own 2 PlayStation 4s currently. We're all my sisters are also gamers, so we all own, several, systems of the same kind.
I don't have that. I'm looking to buy my fucking self with my PlayStation 3 and 4, and I got nothing to play my PlayStation 2 games on.
Julian left with the goodness. But because of that, it's situational. So it's not fair, essentially, for me to say those things because my situation is different than vast majority may not have a working PlayStation 2. Even me who owns that still wanted Capcom to say, hey, y'all boys did that with Devil May Cry. Onimusha sold just as less. Come the fuck on. Can you guys make a collection of that? I would personally buy a collection of that just to play it in HD. Mm-hmm. I would have a collection of that just to have it preserved, period. Because it's not saying, oh, well, I could play my PlayStation 2 games right now. Okay, what if I can't years from now?
Absolutely.
That's what I'm getting at. So I have some of the games that are currently on PlayStation 3 for their little classic selection of PlayStation 1. Some of their games I bought simply because I wanted to just have the digital versions of some of their games versus, okay, I'm going to whip out the N64 to play, Resident Evil 2. It's not saying that, oh, well, I have it and here I am, rebuying it. I want to play the sharper looking version. If I'm going to replay it, it means nothing for me to spend $5 to play the better looking version. It means nothing for me to essentially play. It means nothing for me to play a version that has faster load times. Instead of, let me bring out the PlayStation 2, let me go out and get a whole bunch of old ass games and fuck I look like.
That's exactly the reason why I bought Grandia 2, the Anniversary Edition. It's not because it's not because I wanted to play Grandia on my PC. Is that I wanted to play Grandia, period. I needed, I don't have my Dreamcast. My Dreamcast don't work no more. So I wanted to actually play the game again, and it's the only way I can play the game.
Now consider this. You bring a good point with you buying Grandia 2 to play this version. If we were to have all of Sega's games, not even some of them, all of them, on digital, would you have bought that game digital a long time ago?
Absolutely.
Versus just playing...
Honestly, I really feel like I would have.
If you consider that you would have bought it, do you feel you would have bought this newer version?
If I already had it digital?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Well, see, there you go.
Honestly,
so, I mean, that goes to show you that...
But, at the same time, I feel like... Granted, if I had the option, I'm the kind of guy, I like my hard copies.
No, I agree. No, you're right, though. You're right, Craig. You're right.
I literally just bought, I made sure that I bought my new, I just bought StarCraft, the new expansion of StarCraft 2. I made sure that shit was physical.
Boy, you made sure it was physical. That's my
dog. I already had physical, the original and Heart of the Swarm.
That's my dog.
Physical, so I can't just not get the third one physical. How the fuck? So I have the third one physical too, but I do like my physical copies. But at the same time, if I had bought it digital,
for preservation
back then, I probably would not have bought it because the only reason I bought it was because I don't have the means of playing it. But if I had bought it digital, I would have had the means of playing it. I would have been playing that game for forever. From the day I bought it to now, I probably would have beaten that game 20 times over. But because I no longer have the system to play it on, I probably would have beaten that game twice.
That's the situation that we have also with Shenmue 2 and Shenmue 1 and 2.
Exactly.
In terms of people wanting these titles to be brought
over.
That
collection, boy. It's coming.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Sega's doing it. Sega's doing it.
They want that Zenny, man. They need that Zenny.
They need the Zen. They're like, what? People are interested in Shenmue? But
excuse me? People like our franchises?
But it's
fucking sick.
Because of that, it makes you say, okay, is it upon the person who makes the platform to allow this to happen, or is it upon the publisher to even support it? And consider this, because I don't know if you knew this or not, but Sega's basically porting and remastering Valkyria Chronicles in the PlayStation 4, and they're making a sequel too. But we can talk about that later. You can nerd about that later.
They already made two, didn't they?
Yeah, this is the fourth game. They're making a fourth game for the PlayStation 4.
Where was the third one?
Craig's why the boys made it?
Excuse me?
Yeah, they made the I know why you say it, because the third one never came to the West.
That's okay.
All right,
Good.
Craig's slow down, hold the phone. Craig's slow down, hold the phone.
I thought I wasn't a fan or some shit. What the fuck?
Craig's slow down, hold the phone. No, but for the Valkyria Chronicles, it's a full on remaster. Okay. It's for some games I would personally like a restoration and a remaster. Some games I don't mind a porting of. You brought it from one platform to the other platform.
There are certain
I don't know if I care too much.
It's kind of like remaking a movie in a sense where it's you kind of want it, but you kind of want it done right. If it's not done perfect, it's going to be fucking shitty.
Everyone does that. When they see either a remake of a film or a game, they just nitpick every single moment.
It's oh my god, so many articles on Final Fantasy VII.
They're going to do that on Final Fantasy VII.
Holy shit.
They'd be the angle of that sword.
There are literally two sides of that argument. Either people who are just super fucking excited, or people who are just super fucking pissed. Yeah. There is no in between.
Because it's when you get the idea of, okay, let's say if Sony had complete PC. If Sony had complete backwards compatibility with PlayStation 3 and somehow they made it happen, you may not actually see any remaster of Valkyria Chronicles at all.
Right.
So if you think about it in that respect, I mean, yeah, if you want to play the game and you weren't unable to play the game for whatever purpose, sure, play the best version that does release. But if in that respect you never, if you want to replay it in that respect, you would want to have that version that was a cooler looking version.
My problem then comes down because if you get to that sort of mentality, all of a sudden it's like, oh man, PlayStation 5 comes out. Better remaster all those games that remastered PlayStation 4 and release on PlayStation 5. Now it's like, when does it end?
It doesn't.
Like, how many times do I have to rebuy the same game just so I can keep playing it?
It doesn't. It doesn't. No, but in terms of remasters, I never recommend porting or remastering. I never recommend porting or remastering in the respect that you had to play it because you didn't own the other version.
Right.
Or, you wanted to replay the other version. Mm-hmm. Only because most of the remasters that have come out have really just been, bump in resolution, look a little sharper.
Yeah.
That's with a lot of them. So with the exception of, let's say, the Last of Us remaster, that's one of the few exceptions, or even God of War 3. Those two games are some of the few things where it's like, yeah, they kind of, or Uncharted Collection, actually, I don't know why I forgot that. But if they kind of went a little bit above and beyond in terms of the remastering of it, because you have it in 60 frames, which you didn't have it before. Right. So you have it in a respect that, well, if we did port it and it worked anyway, or not port it, if you could play it on that platform, you would have never got all those bumps. Right. Now, I don't know how for sure that maybe not could have been, because the PlayStation 2 stuff that we're seeing on PlayStation 4 has it running at 60 frames. It has it running at 60 frames because of clearly the power difference. Mm-hmm. Now, we don't really know if that would have been the true case if you could play Uncharted on a PlayStation 4, right. If it would just be this rock solid 60 frames the entire time.
I'm not completely against remasters because, yes, it can bring something good to the game. Like you said, it can bump up the frame rate. You can even fix a couple of gameplay issues. Let's say, like...
Did they do that with Uncharted Collection?
I mean, I'm sure they did, because I'm sure especially with the first Uncharted, everyone knows Uncharted 2 controlled way better than Uncharted 1 did. Mm-hmm. And I haven't played the Uncharted Collection, so don't quote me on this, but I feel that if they were smart, they would have changed the gameplay of Uncharted 1 to kind of match the rest of the series.
You're crazy,
It was just better.
That would be like...
And especially because, a lot of it had to do with the fact that, Uncharted 1 came out when PlayStation 3 was first coming out, so it had a lot of 6-axis gimmicks in there, where you're walking across a log and you have to balance the controller type shit. Oh, it's so
that was
bad.
The worst parts of that game.
The worst was definitely, everyone knows the grenade
shit. I didn't even throw grenades because that garbage ass shit.
Yeah. You do not throw grenades in Uncharted 1 on the PlayStation 3. Whether or not they changed it in the collection, I still don't know because I haven't played it. But I'm pretty sure.
Well, they would have had to because of that. I don't know if the whole gyroscope thing is in PlayStation 4's controller, so I'd make that done.
And to me, they would have fixed that to make it more streamlined with the other games, in the PlayStation 4 collection. Because again, not only can you not do that in the PlayStation 4, but why would you want to?
I agree.
Type shit.
I agree.
I get that the fact that when you make your remasters, you can actually improve the game itself, but at the same time, I have all these it's like again, it brings us back to the whole point where when you remaster a movie. Let's take the perfect example would be the Star Wars movies.
Are you in terms of doing restoration
when
stuff,
remasters and redoings? Sure, Lucas, he went ahead, he redid all those movies the way he thought that he wanted them to be done. And to a lot of people, he ruined those movies. He ruined the original trilogy.
So what you're saying is don't watch them fucking shitty ass director cuts.
No, don't.
Don't
watch
You're a good kid.
I will give you the correct versions to watch.
You're a good kid to tell me this.
There are a lot of people who don't because there's the whole Greedo shoots first controversy type shit.
Lucas is
there are remasters that don't do it right, and we should have the option to play the originals like you do in movies. Like I said,
you're right. I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
Remasters are fine when you go ahead and
I get what you mean.
But we should always have the option to play the original.
Because it's like having the option to essentially play the original it still gives you, if you have the original, and let's say they do a remaster of it, it gives you the option to know, well, I don't need to buy it specifically just to play it because I cannot play it in general.
I just reminded myself. It's like in Star Wars Episode 6 when they fucked it up, and the end when they just show. Fuck it.
Spoiling forever. Spoiling forever. You're not a good kid. You're not a good kid. Spoiling forever.
I'm literally the only person I'm spoiling for is you because everyone else in the fucking world has seen these movies.
Woo! I'm not saying I hate that series, no, but in the respect that if you own the original game and a remaster comes up and you can play the original game on that system, of course you may not say, "Fuck it, I'm not going to buy the remaster."
I mean,
so the way I feel about it is that the bump in resolution and frame rate that I've seen from them are better than any of the titles that we saw previously on other generations in terms of, let's say, something like the ports that came, or I would say any of the ports that came during the PlayStation 3 generation, like titles like Bully or something, or even titles like when they ported San Andreas. San Andreas right now is not, 1080p, 60 frames, even though on 360 it very much can be, and it's not. So you have these ports that come out where they're not really doing anything with the hardware to make it make sense. So some people were saying, some people were saying stuff like, oh, well, maybe the 360 or PlayStation 3 couldn't. I don't agree because we already have PlayStation 3 titles and 360 titles that are 1080p or that ran 60 frames or one or the other. So in that respect, I believe every PlayStation 2 game, if they can make it that, should run that if they can, and if they want to direct it to be that, I would say. So in that respect, the remaster is good. Let's say if you own the platform and your platform is BC, but you never played the game. Let's say you're in a situation where Beyond Two Souls is coming out next week. Hypothetical. Let's say Beyond Two Souls is coming out next week, and you already own a copy of Beyond Two Souls.
I do. Look at that.
But let's say I just own the platform. I don't own a copy of Beyond Two Souls. I own the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation 4. I do not own the copy of Beyond Two Souls, and the game's coming on PlayStation 4 next week. I might say to myself, I could either buy this copy used, and no one's going to get my fucking money, or I could go out and next week buy the PlayStation 4 digital version, and now the company will get my money for the game that I got. Right. But I got something in return. I got a bump in resolution. I got it in a way where I know I probably wasn't going to get the sexy frame rate and the sexy resolution. I wasn't going to get all of that if they just ported it, considering we didn't get that last generation. It's not really even of the... It's not even of the publishers, truthfully, to even have to do that in some respect. Yeah. I know that some people feel that's like sort of a mandatory thing, but the way they see it is, we're just bringing this title over. You don't need to buy it, take it or leave it type of ordeal. But just to wrap it up, I don't necessarily believe in a business sense that it's necessary to have it. I think it's nice to have it, but the way the systems I see in terms of sales, the way I see the systems now is, I don't think any of the systems in the past ever sold because of those purposes. I don't think the systems now are selling because of any of it, because PlayStation 4 and Xbox One are doing record sales right now without, BC.
It's rough because, again, when we started this podcast, I was way in the lines of, everything needs backwards compatibility because I have a lot of games. I'm greedy and I got a lot of games I want to play. Yeah. But I do understand, getting a broader view of this whole thing. Mm-hmm. I do understand that, it is difficult to do these things, but at the same time, a lot of systems back then didn't necessarily sell these things because there wasn't anything to sell yet. Mm-hmm. Whereas, you look at when the PlayStation 2 came out, PlayStation 2 had backwards compatibility. Mm-hmm. People didn't necessarily buy a PlayStation 2 for backwards compatibility because all you had was PlayStation 1. All you had was the PlayStation 1 library. Now that you have PlayStation 3 coming out and PlayStation 4, now you have, when PlayStation 3 came out, you have 2 generations of games. Mm-hmm. Now with PlayStation 4, you have 3 generations of games. Now when PlayStation 5 comes, you're going to have 4 generations of games backlogged that now no one can play. Mm-hmm. So the longer you go, the further you get into your development, the more backlog you're going to have of all these games that we have grown up on. We have we have lived our lives and have influenced our lives in such a way that you're gonna. eventually gonna get to a point where like, man, I need to play these games again, and it's just like it gets hard. It becomes hard.
Yeah, because like you have to question like financially how viable is it to ever do any of these things.
Like, do you want to progress technologically, or do you want to keep giving your customers these games that they've already
ability to play them? But I get that. I mean,
and it's rough. It's
like
a hard
exactly. I like we're saying before.
It's rough because I feel like a lot of our podcasts it always comes down to like, man, that's a difficult question to answer, but it's not ours to answer. So see you later.
It's like I don't even want it to be that, but it's like
no, but
I got you. It's hard because it's like it's like I get that in a perfect world we could have the entire thing. In a perfect world, in my opinion, we would just have this extremely powerful system that by default emulated every single past generation. Absolutely. And I believe one day we'll probably get there. It's just that you would have to say something like it would always have to support Bluetooth because you could use your PlayStation 3 controller on it because 6-axis. Right. And then you might have to say, oh yeah, but there's another pressure-sensitive adapter that allows you to have the pressure-sensitive for the PlayStation 2 controller. Because of all the different inputs that have come out throughout the years of these generations, it's extremely difficult to now say, okay, we're going to emulate this game.
I didn't even take that into consideration before this podcast started.
Exactly. It's like when you brought up the thing with 6-axis, and I'm even thinking about the thing with Metal Gear Solid in terms of the pressure-sensitive buttons, or any series with pressure-sensitive buttons, you're now thinking about, okay, the next system that doesn't have this, how do you now play it may support the game, but it's not even the same feeling. Something's missing from it.
I mean, consider a game like that game Flower. That was literally just designed around 6-axis.
That was, and like now it's
that's a great game, Mike. That's a great game. It's a beautiful game. It's literally designed around
it does have it because I played Flower like a couple weeks ago. I remember playing Flower on PlayStation 4. Okay, the system does. It does have it. Because now that I think about it, I remember tilting and saying, "How the fuck do I play this thing?"
But that's literally around 6-axis.
Yes, but that's only around the chance that even happens. Let's say they say, fuck it, we're not going to do this in the next platform. Exactly. Then it's like you're in a situation where none of these games even work.
You literally, in order to do backwards compatibility now,
you have to be like...
You have to take every single stint of everything experimental technology you've ever done ever, and put it into every later system.
Basically. It's going to be like, in the long run, this is what it is, guys. Like, we did it once. 20 years later. It's like...
There's that one engineer who's like, fuck, why the fuck did we do this?
It's like, look what y'all boys started. The only thing I would think to really support and change this is just to have some sort of like USB adapter. Here's the USB adapter. You can now plug in your PlayStation 2 controller. Or here's the USB adapter. You can now plug in your PlayStation 3 controller. Plug in that's the only way I could see that really working. Because now that we're talking about this, I kind of see some workarounds that make sense. That don't necessarily mean that the system has to by default come with them. Only if you fucking feel like giving a fuck about them. But
it's hard.
In that regard, backwards compatibility. Actually, before we end it, I would like to know when they do announce this, because I feel it's probably going to happen. What's the first PlayStation 2 game you're going to play on your PlayStation 4?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, you would think the default would just be Final Fantasy X because, like, my favorite game of all time. But it probably won't be that because I had it on PlayStation 3 and I can still play it on PlayStation 3. So, my next one...
Did you get that when you had your PS3 Fat?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have to replay it now.
See, that's another amazing example. So you could have played it. You had your PlayStation 3 Fat, which could play PlayStation 2 games, but you bought the PlayStation 3 version of Final
That was because, listen.
Craig's like, hold on, boys. Hold the phone.
That's another podcast. But
you bought it, though.
That's a good question. Like, I guess the first game I would play, my first PlayStation 2 game I would play would probably be, like, one of the Persona games.
That's a good point.
Because I haven't, I haven't played Persona 3 in a very long time. And I haven't played it in a long time. So, I guess I could probably boot that shit up again.
That is a good play. I would actually, I probably want to play Onimusha 2 again because I just recently played that, so I would probably play either Onimusha 3 or Dawn of Dreams. I've actually been also thinking about replaying Xenosaga.
Ooh, Xenosaga.
Game was good as fuck.
That game was good as fuck.
Zonar.
I'd probably look back into the Zone of Enders games too.
Why Dave? Good ass series right there. And I recently got those for PlayStation 3, so it's like, what are you gonna do? So it's
God damn it.
So it's like there are a couple PlayStation 2 games that they did little collection for that I got. So it's like,
dude, I got.
And those collections I actually think
are
are
Cooper collection, the Jack and Daxter collection. Like, I got so many collections.
Some of those collections are better deals in my opinion than actually buying the entire catalog on PlayStation 2.
I'm almost upset that I bought Jack and Daxter 1, 2, and 3, and Sly Cooper 1, 2, and 3, and not just buying the collections themselves. But you didn't know.
Yeah, exactly. You know. I like that you could. This is what I mean too when I say that the industry is getting help with this too. Mm-hmm. The fact that this was ported and you bought some of those collections that came out, somebody got money because of them. In my opinion, it's better than leaving it forever to essentially only exist.
I'm not saying I'm glad I bought the Sly Cooper 3 collection because it led to the Sly Cooper 4 game being released. And now I guess the Sly Cooper movie's being made.
Oh, yeah.
Which is kind of weird.
That is weird.
I prefer a Sly Cooper 5 than a Sly Cooper movie. But
I don't even think that was the choice, Craig. I don't even think those were options. They're just like, are we doing a movie?
I would really prefer the Sly Cooper. I mean, make a Sly Cooper
5. Craig.
But
maybe they are. Maybe that other companies.
Keep my fingers crossed. I mean, whatever company made Sly Cooper 4, I forget the company's name. But
it was like Senzaru.
Yeah, it was a weird company. It wasn't Sucker Punch.
Yeah, I don't remember the name. I want to say it's Senzuru or something. It started with that, and I think that's
they did a decent job. They made a decent game. It wasn't.
I was right.
It wasn't Sly Cooper 1, 2, or 3, but it was a good game.
There you go.
But again, another podcast.
And the team that did that was a port team.
That's another podcast.
Remasters build businesses.
Yeah,
they're the one.
Another day. We're talking too much.
I'm the 1%.
Talking too damn much.
I'm the 1%. Yeah, but at the end of the day, they're probably going to announce PlayStation 2 BC. Probably going to be great for us to go and revisit our older titles. But in the grand scheme of things, I mean, I don't see anybody buying a PlayStation 4 to play a PlayStation 2
game.
Absolutely. But a nice gesture on both from Sony and Microsoft nonetheless. It's your boy Ed.
It's your boy Craig.
And that's what it is.
Episode 12.